That should be good. I mean, I bathed and everything. Brush my teeth. So much for that. I want to be sure that, can you hear me now? Sound like an AT&T. Well, first of all, I have something to say about last week. By the way, hi Lewis and Stump family, I'm glad you're here. This last week we had VBS, and it was encouraging to see kids, and we had some, but it was also encouraging to see some of you folks. And I know it's dangerous to start naming names because I might forget somebody, perish the thought. But I want to mention some names anyway. First of all, I want to thank Sarah and Malachi. I don't know if this is the first VBS that they have basically took charge of, but you did a good job, and I'm very proud and very pleased with you. We had a number of others that, and I know some of you have done Bible school for years and years and years, and some of you are tired. But you came through like troopers anyway, and I was really glad to see that. We had Patsy back here that not only provided some of the refreshments, but she taught the lesson every day. And Patsy, I thank you for that. We had ladies that also helped with refreshments. Jane brought some. I know Carolyn was here every day for that express purpose to get all that ready. And she did an excellent job as well. Kay did an excellent job also, and I know that Kay's done VBS before, once or twice, am I right? But she came through with flying colors, helped wherever she was needed, taught the crafts when the last day Joanne was not here, and I thought she did a good job in everything that she did this week. But we've had some that really I wanted to point out especially. One of them is our main man Rick, wherever he went. There he is. Rick was here doing the motions, playing the games, rolling around on the dirt out there in the hot sun. And Rick, I was really pleased. I thank you for that. We had two other individuals that I want to mention. One of them's here, one of them is not here this morning, I don't think. Maybe she is. Who's behind the platform? There we go, they're both here. Jocelyn and Brooklyn. I was just really pleased with both of you. They did whatever they needed to do, and they did it well. They did it with whole heart, and very mature young ladies, and I was very pleased with that. Jane, and supposedly me, I didn't really do much, but Jane's job was to get children herded to where they were supposed to be when they were supposed to be there. And so I thank her for that too. Nancy and Penny took care of the registration and keeping track of, because I have a lot of trouble remembering names and knowing where these children came from. But they did a good job of keeping track of who was who. And I just want to thank them for that. I really appreciate that. The question always comes, does it do any good? You know, and I sometimes wonder about if anything we do really does any good. And we may never know until heaven as to what good we do, but it is a way to get to know young people and to address some of the needs in their life, and I guarantee you they have needs. Many know that it takes more than a week of VBS to train up a child in the way he should go, so that when he's old, he won't depart from that. It takes parental participation also, and we have in this city a lot of parents with children that not only don't know how to parent, but they don't know the Lord, which is maybe the biggest issue of their entire life. And so we do have a mission field here, and again, I appreciate all of you that participated in that. Have you ever come across in your, just as you're going through life, a situation that makes you think about the grace of God? Sometimes we don't put it that way, but I admit I watch YouTube because that's how I learned to do a number of things. I'm trying to get better on the guitar, watching YouTube. I've watched YouTubes on piano and wiring and foam and fiberglass construction and a lot of other things. But I saw one, and I don't know exactly what attracted me to it, but it was about repossessing a car. The car was actually put up as collateral for a bond that a woman had placed to get her out of jail, quite frankly. And then after she was out of jail, didn't make any payments to the bail bondsman. And this had gone on for some time, evidently. And they had wrestled with this before, but finally the time came when the bail bondsman said, she's in violation of the contract. He hired a professional to go get the vehicle. When he showed up and told her what it was about, she immediately was irate and said, you are not to underline the not, you are not taking this vehicle, which obviously he could and ultimately did. But she said, you cannot take this vehicle. And she rode that horse for as long as she could. But then the next thing she said was, it's not fair. Now, those are things that we hear from people regarding our situation with God. We all are sinners. We know that. The book of Romans tells us that in no uncertain terms. But some people go through life really kind of like the bull in the china closet that says, well, what did I do wrong? And you can see the debris left of their life by the messes behind them, with their children, by the way, people are not born with a poor credit rating. Did you know that? That may be a surprise to some. You're not born with that. They don't put on your birth certificate credit rating 400 or whatever. You earn that. You earn it. And she had earned it. But her response was, you are not going to take this car. Well, what does that mean? Some people go through life really believing that they write the rules. True? Some people really think that everything should go as they think it should go. And when they are the ones in violation, the tendency is always to point it to someone else. Hence, excuse number 2, it's not fair. Fairness is something that we have just born with us, I think. Little children start out, and as soon as they can talk, and there's 2 of them, and one of them takes the toy and goes the other way, and then the parent intervenes or whatever, and they try to set things right, but they don't get it right from everyone's perspective, and the one child says, what? That's not fair. We have a sense of fairness, and sometimes our sense of fairness is skewed a little bit in favor of what we wish it were. Well, obviously, in both of these cases, she didn't write the rules. She tried to prevent them from taking the car by sitting on it, climbing on it, being abusive. I mean, it would have been funny if it weren't so sad. And then, after saying that you can't, which you could, then she says, well, it's not fair. Then she went a step farther. Well, then you've got to provide me something else to drive. No, he didn't. That wasn't in the contract. Wasn't at all. Finally, she said, well, even a bicycle. So from where they were standing, he walked about as far as from here to that wall, and there was a bicycle. And he said, here is a bicycle. So she was perfectly happy after that. No, she wasn't. People are never happy. We do that with God sometimes. We think, rewrite the rules. And sometimes we think, well, what have I done so bad? All have sinned, but I just have these little bitty sins, and we don't seem to realize that if you have sinned, you are, by definition, a what? A sinner. She was a lawbreaker. That's how she ended up in jail. That's how she was almost going to go there again. If she had assaulted that guy, and she was about to, and he told her, he says, I guarantee you, you will go to jail. And he was right on that one. I bet he would have. He would have called the police. She would have been arrested. So she didn't carry through on that one. But in all these situations, she was thinking she was in control, only to find out that she's not. We're not in control with our relationship with God and with heaven. But we have something to be thankful for. Somebody paid our bond in full. See, she could have gotten her vehicle back. She had 15 days to come up with the money to pay up her contract, and she could have had it back. But she wasn't going to do that, and she knew it. Why? Well, you can't turn on a dime, and if she'd had a whole life of being irresponsible and had to come up with, and that vehicle was not an inexpensive one, we'll put it that way, it wasn't going to happen. We have an insurmountable debt that we have to pay in order to be free and clear. And I couldn't help but think, that's kind of like it is with us and God. But we have someone that didn't just go our bail, he paid our fine. He cleared the books. And so that's a little bit of what leads us into this chapter of Galatians chapter 4. We have been talking for some time, not just in this book, but in other books, about how one of the biggest challenges that Paul had with these churches that he started was there's always someone coming in and trying to make Jews out of them first, change their idea of grace and make it more legalistic. You got to do this and this and this. You got to observe this holiday. You got to, observe this feast. He never says you can't. But when you start requiring people to do things that Scripture doesn't require, that puts you in the position of making the rules, and you don't make the rules. He's quite literally upset. If you recall, I started this book, I think it was this book, one of these chapters, being irate with you, because Paul was being irate with the church at Galatia. And he says here in this chapter that he was perturbed. And he even wondered if his message to them had done any good at all. Why? Well, because they were allowing some to come in and take them captive in a direction that nobody in their right mind would want to go. If you had the ability to be free, why would you choose to be enslaved? We say, well, we wouldn't. But they did. And you know what? We do too. And here's how that works. Some people, I trained agents. You all know that. I've said that before. And some of them said, well, what are we trying to do here? Well, we're building a company. I always try to paint the big picture. Why? Because that's what got me involved with that. We're building a company. And here's how we do it, piece by piece, and that's the general rule. And here's how we go about this particular stage. Okay. Others didn't care anything about that. They just said, tell them what to say. I just want the rule. What do I say? And we can work with that. But generally, they wouldn't learn what to say either. So it's like, again, trying to rewrite the rules. I had one young man, who his older brother went to Hollywood and was doing TV commercials. Pretty impressive. And so this young man wanted to follow in his steps. He wanted to go into a professional career of television, movies, that kind of thing. Okay, so it's my job to train him. We had a script. Why? Well, because people say the wrong things. You don't show up on the door and have some lady come to the door, open the screen this far to ask who you are, and you run up and stick your hand in there to shake hands and ask if you can come in. Whoa, that's a little aggressive. So he said, don't do that. Identify yourself. They need to know who you are. They need to know who sent you, why you're there. And we told them how to do that. But people don't do that. They do it their own way and fail. And so this young man, keep in mind, he wants to go into acting, where you have a script and you have a director, and you don't just go wing it. And he wanted to just go wing it. And I said, well, give me a presentation, which I normally did. That was not anything unusual. And it was terrible. I thought nobody's going to buy anything based on that, let alone stock in a startup company. We didn't like that. Told me that, said I was being too picky. Well, you can do it your way and keep on failing, or you can do it my way, and it wasn't my way. It wasn't. I didn't invent it. But the reason I was a manager was because I had learned to do it their way. And I found out it did work. See, I prided myself. I can think on my feet. I don't have to have a script, but I learned something, and that is the script was a script for a reason. Now, the next day we had an appointment set. And he was to meet me at that location at a certain time, just moments before we were to go in and do the presentation. Well, I'm there early. And he's not. And he doesn't come. And it's time to go in, he still doesn't come. And I wait just as long as I can wait. And finally I went in, and I never saw that young man again. Didn't even have the courtesy to say, you know, I'm not going to do this. He could have called me on the phone and said, you know, I'm not going to do this. Go on, and you do the meeting because I'm not going to be there. No, he didn't have that much courtesy, didn't have that much gumption. The point I want to make is, how do we deal with God? We know what to do. We know what the message is. What is it? It's a message of grace, faith in God, demonstrated by His grace through the blood of Jesus Christ. It's not complicated. And that's what He's telling them here. Why would you want to go back to a set of rules? We don't have to bring a calf every year and slaughter it. We should be thankful for that. Maybe our salvation is too easy, too inexpensive. Because what does it cost? On the one hand, you can say nothing. On the other hand, you can say, no, just everything. But it's not something we can't pay. All we have to do is accept what God has already provided for us. That's not hard. But sometimes we want to do it by different means. Now, what are those means? I've not read much of this chapter to you this morning, and you can read it. I want to pick up here in verse 12, for example. He brings to their attention that how he got to know them in the first place. It was because of his illness, and they didn't look at him as a burden. They actually did a very good job of taking care of him. He said, instead you welcomed me as if I were an angel of God, as if I were Christ Jesus himself. Where's your blessing now? I can testify that if you could have done so, you would have torn out your eyes and given them to me. That's one of the reasons I think some people think that Paul's thorn in the flesh had to do with his eyesight. I don't know if it's the case or not, but he tells them, you would have given me your eyesight if you thought you could. But he says, now I become your enemy by telling you the truth. Just like that woman thought the guy that came to get the car was her enemy. And at one point she said, why don't you work with me? And he said, I have been working with you. I'm trying to work with you now. I'm telling you how you can get your car back. But he was the bad guy. It's like he caused the situation. Have you ever noticed that? People that owe someone else money, and because they don't pay, it's the other guy's fault. Sometimes we blame God for whose problem? Ours. If he had just put us in this mess, I don't know about you, but I find him. I go after him. I've been in messes, and I have to look back and say, well, whose fault was that? Oh, it was mine. He goes on to say, those people are zealous to win you over, but for no good. Have you ever wondered why people that work for the devil are so evangelistic, so zealous? Why an atheist is interested in converting you to atheism? Why? If I were an atheist, it would be, you want to talk about God? I just leave. Why waste time talking about something that you don't think exists, someone that you don't believe exists? But that's not the way it works. Why? Because we all want to please our Father, even if our Father is the devil. It says this, verse 18, it's time to be zealous. You know, I enjoyed and appreciated the zeal that I saw last week. But it was zeal for a good purpose. And that's what he says. It's time to be zealous, provided the purpose is good. And to be so always, not just when I'm with you. You know, when you call on people, and we did prior to this, you know, we went around and we called people. And when I tell people, you know, that I am a minister in the church, which is something, you know, that I haven't always done, they're very quick to tell me that they go to church somewhere, sometime. As long as you don't press them as to where is that. I had one guy say, yeah, I go to Christ Church. We're going, oh, well, you know so-and-so. Well, no. Well, maybe you know so-and-so. Now, I'm not talking about I'm talking about people in leadership, like a preacher, like others that are involved in meeting and greeting people. No, well, when was the last time you were there? Well, it's been a while. You see, we try to convince other people that our relationship with God is just okay. And we had a lady say, oh, we go to church. The only one that was the least bit short with us. Everyone else really seemed very receptive. Now, most of the kids didn't actually show up, but some did. Now, he says, my dear children, verse 19, for whom I am again in the pains of childbirth until Christ is formed in you. How much do we hurt for other people? Well, nothing like childbirth. How I wish I could be with you now and change my tone because I'm perplexed about you. Is God ever perplexed? You know, sometimes we think, well, God is always perplexed with me. Why? Because I give him so many reasons to be. But guess what? He's a father. The prayer that Jesus taught, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. And think about that. God is our Father. Most of you are parents. Well, how do you feel about your children? Do you want to see them burn? No. What do you want for them? You want to spend eternity with them, don't you? How important is that? It should be pretty important. We want to make sure they have an education so they can earn a living and they're going to buy a nice house and a new car. That's what we're interested in. A car that in, few years and few miles, 100 miles, 100,000 miles or two, is going to need to be replaced. But it's very important that we have one. That's why it was so important that woman felt like it was everybody else's responsibility to provide her one. How much more important eternity? Now he uses the example, and I'm going to run out of time, even though I'm not going with that thought, because according to that, I still have an hour and a half to go. He used the example of Abraham and two women, Sarah and Hagar. And you know that story. I'm not going to go into it because you know that. But the point is, those two children may not have been that different. They were half brothers. They had the same dad. They lived in the same house. But one was a slave and the other was a legitimate heir. Which do you want to be? We'd rather be the heir, wouldn't we? But while we're young, there's really no difference. One is educated and disciplined, and the other is educated and disciplined. And maybe there's not that much different, but the time comes when the heir gets the stuff. He's the one that makes the rules of the household. He's the one. And that's what he says about the law. You're not in a position to write the rules until you're the heir. The Old Testament was that period of time preparing the way for Jesus and his adopted brothers and sisters, us. We have opportunity to be heirs with him. That's pretty big stuff. It's more important than a new car or a new house, even a nice one. This morning, my challenge to you is this. If you think you stand before God and will be pronounced not guilty because you attend church on a regular basis, you will be sadly disappointed. Because God looks deeper than that. What does he want to know? He wants to know where your heart is. Well, how can he tell that? Well, there's lots of ways. One is he can look at your checkbook. And this is not a ploy for money, but what it does say is we put money in what we're interested in, don't we? And conversely, if you put money, it creates interest. I mean, not just dollar interest, but your interest. I went out selling stock to a company that didn't exist before. People had never heard of it. And I'm asking them to write a check, and some of them did. They wrote big ones, some of them. I picked up $75,000 checks in one shot. And I'm thinking, I didn't know people could do that, but some can. And then some put in $1,000, but that was the minimum. But they wanted to be a part of something. And once their money was there, seems like their heart kind of follows the money. That's why Jesus didn't say, wherever your heart is, there your treasure will be. He said it the other way around. Wherever your treasure is, there will your heart be. That's one way. What's your time spent on? What's your message? When you talk to people, do you do it from a perspective of pointing them to Jesus in any shape, manner, or form? Do we even care? my challenge is care. My challenge is don't rely on rules. Jesus died, so that's not where it's at. Where it is at is, where's your heart? What's your belief? We always say, well, they're a faith-only group, and that means, you only believe and you don't do anything else. And there's several ways of thinking of that, but one is, if you just want to believe, then believe. Believe all of it. What does it say? Well, every account of conversion is in the book of Acts, and everyone, nobody says the sinner's prayer. I'm not opposed to it, but they're not told, now say this prayer. No, what are they told to do? Repent and be baptized. And they are. I think every time. That might be something to go for. We're going to stand. I guess I'm waiting for Joanne to show up. She's not coming. We're going to stand, and I think the hymn is, what is it? Because I'm playing it on the piano. I better know what it is. Where he leads me, I will follow. Give me just a moment. And it is in the keys we do the same.